streaming now, connected audio is there. All you can talk loud, it will absolutely pick up. It's very sensitive. So that works there. And then once I click in here, you're live here. And then you can progress through here. Good. I'll do intro real quick and get everybody in here. Let's just sit down there. Yeah, sit down. Coach. All right, guys. So I'm gonna fire this thing up. It's 3:30, which in New Orleans is time to get a drink. We're almost there. But we figured go out with a bang, go out with prior authorization because nothing makes you want to drink more than prior authorization. You hit on this note and then it's straight to the bar, straight to Bourbon Street, and we solved all the prior auth problems. So, but no, absolute pleasure. Manish, I have the fortunate pleasure, and he has the unfortunate pleasure of working with me. We're together on the same team, which is fun. We've teamed up. We've created some cool things. A lot of people that are here at this conference to solve some problems in the prior authorization space. So I will not do a lengthy intro, and I will turn it over to Manish. But no, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks, Jordan. Thank you, guys. Hey, nice to meet you all. And I'm so sorry I'm the last person standing between you and some great drink. So I'll try to make it quick. I promise not to make it painless because, as we all know, prior authorizations are anything but painless. I've been dealing with prior authorization for very, very long time. And I always thought that there will be that one day when we will have a magic pill or a magic button that you can press, and boom, you have your prior authorization. So, just something about myself. I'm based out of Dallas, Texas. I have spent 17 years managing mainly oncology, but also some multi specialty practices. I have a Six Sigma and Green Belt in healthcare processes from Villanova University. And I have co founded various healthcare revenue cycle management as well as healthcare technology companies, most recently primarily focused on this solving the vexing problem of prior authorization, especially in the area that we mainly deal with, which is infusion drugs. So, what is prior authorization? Um, I mean, there are tons of definitions that anybody can come up with, but to me, somebody who has dealt with this thing for so long, there's only one definition. And that is a tool for insurance companies to neither delay or deny care, period. There is absolutely no other definition of prior authorization. This is it. So if somebody ever asks you, yeah, this is what it says in Webster for what's prior authorization. So here is some more prior authorization humor. And then some more. And trust me, this happens. I don't know how often you have gone to get prior authorization for a drug. Yeah, we'll authorize it for 10 units. And then suddenly the nurse forgets that, oh, I only have prior auth for 10 units. What's going to happen from 11 unit onwards? Well, the payers keep your money. That's exactly what's going to happen. So, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, but it is literally the most costly and time consuming industry, and especially for us in the infusion world. A simple denial or a lack of prior auth can cost tens of thousands of dollars, and so many times with absolutely no recourse. I mean, you cannot go get retro auth, you cannot do anything. We have had situations where the insurance company will say, hey, prior auth wasn't required for this drug. But hey, guess what was required? A predetermination. And since a predetermination was required, we cannot even give you a retro auth. So it's just absolutely ridiculous, all these things that insurance companies come up with. And this is a very sobering statistics, especially people like us who dealt with oncology prior auth for a very, very long time. 4 weeks delay, this was a research study done, increases the death rates, and especially in oncology and also in specialized radiology procedures by 8%. And 8 weeks delay by 17% and 12 weeks delay by 26%. And I'm sure a lot of you are asking 12 weeks delay in prior auth. I have dealt with those, and I'm sure some of you have as well. Just constant appeals in some cases, after several level of appeals, getting a prior auth, and then getting a denial once you submit the claim. Because guess what? A prior authorization is not a guarantee for payment. All of us have heard that multiple times. So just a brief history of how prior auth started. It started with 1960s with the onset of Medicare and Medicaid. It grew rapidly with as the healthcare costs went up. And if you remember, and most of you probably won't, but in early 60s, 70s, 80s, even 90s, the drugs didn't cost as much, even the procedures didn't cost as much. But suddenly, a drugs that used to cost $200 a week now cost $5,000 a dose. In some cases, $50,000 a dose in oncology, and some of you dealing with autoimmune disorders, or in some cases, the CAR T therapy in oncology can cost $500,000 per therapy. So there was a reason for some of this utilization review guidelines, prior authorization guidelines, but as we have seen and experienced, it's just gone absolute berserk. But why has it gone berserk? Because it works. Who does it work for? For the payers. It works for them. I have a friend who is a CIO for a third party administrator, and I was just talking to him about prior auth and how they see it on the payer side. And what he told me was very interesting. He said, prior auth or no prior auth, 5% of the every single claim they get for high dollar drugs and procedures are kicked out by their algorithm. So the idea is what they are counting on, that, hey, either you are never going to follow up on it, or by the time you get to it, it'll be too late. So it's not just the fact that they are requiring prior auth, but they have such an inconsistent way of dealing with this. You can have the same drug for the same diagnosis, which is per payer policy. You can get the prior auth 90 times, and 91st time they'll deny it. You can get paid 90 times, 91st time they will deny it. So there is absolutely inconsistent approach. And then a lot of payers have tried different models, especially in oncology, which is the highest probably drug user specialty. So there are different models they have tried, and the funny thing is, all of them have had reasonable success, but none of them are as effective as utilization management. I'll give an example. The practice I was managing in oncology, Medicare came up with this model called Oncology Care Model. And the first thing I did, and we were the only practice in the state of Kentucky that applied and was accepted. So I reached out to our largest Medicaid MCO and I said, hey, look, we are doing this for Medicare patients. We'll be handholding these patients from A to Z. We'll be making sure they go to their appointments. It's all closing that referral loop and all that. We'll be keeping a close eye on all the expenses. They will have a special phone number to call if there's any issue so that they don't end up in ER, which is so many people find it a little surprising to believe hospital expenses are still higher than the drug side. And the medical director who actually at least showed enough courtesy to show up and meet me in the practice said that no, we'll just stick to what we have. And that's exactly what Humana and Blue Cross Blue Shield said, who coincidentally wrote support letters for us to join the program. So unfortunately, payers still are thinking that prior authorization and utilization management is the way to go. So prior authorization is just not going anywhere, at least not till something happens from the regulatory side. So 2018, the payers agreed to a framework for prior auth. And this is so interesting. This is from American Medical Association. Every single of these things are common sense things that you and I and any reasonable thinking person or a rational person would think makes sense. So payers agreed to selectively apply prior authorization based, especially for physicians who have demonstrated that they're adhering to evidence-based guidelines and quality measures. Only 9% of I just talked about the experience I personally had. Only 9% of physicians reported that the payers are willing to contract with them for this. This is another one. Stop requiring prior authorization for items that show low variation in use or low prior auth denial rates. It makes perfect common sense. Hey, if somebody has an ankle sprain, they need an x ray, there's no need to go for prior auth and so on and so forth. And it's the same thing you can say for pretty much every procedure, every specialty, even for drugs. There's this diagnosis, this indication, this drug, yes, ready to go, and so on and so forth. But what we found out 84% of physicians have said that not only on the drug side, but also on the procedure side, the prior auth requirements have only gone up. Another thing that we have been asking payers, okay, so you require prior auth, make it transparent. Tell us and be consistent. But guess what happens? Just when you are used to, okay, you know what, Xolair goes for this diagnosis, it's all good to go. Suddenly the form changes, the payer guideline changes, and the prior auth, the patient who was on this drug for a long time suddenly cannot get prior auth just because they changed their guidelines. And that's exactly what they found out in their survey that 65% of physicians are saying that it is very difficult even right now to find out which drug requires prior authorization because there is no consistency. This is a major issue, and this is mainly on the drug side and mainly in specialties where patients are on the same drug for a long time. And it's the exact same thing. They give authorization for a limited period. Sometimes it is limited by the date, sometimes it is limited by the units. And what happens? The ball gets dropped. Either the patient has a gap in therapy, or worse, in many cases, the practices keep giving drugs for many weeks, many months till they found out that, hey, the prior auth expired 3 months ago or 2 months ago for because the units were exhausted. And then help accelerate adoption of national electronic transaction standards. This is a huge vexing issue. And I'll talk about the electronic standards that have been in place for many years, or close to 10 years now, called 278 standard. And there have even been a mandate for pairs to adopt it, and there are very few pairs that have adopted the 278 standards, and even pairs that have adopted it, they are only going to accept certain codes, which are low value radiology imaging and things like that. So this is our current process. McKinsey had done a study on prior auth and use of artificial intelligence in prior auth and where it can make a difference. And this is our current prior auth process, as most of us have experienced. So peer request is gone. The eligibility checking, I'm sure most of you are using some kind of electronic way. If not, I mean, that is very well accepted process. Even though to most practices I talk to, I always say that when you are initiating therapy, always do manual verification first. Don't rely on electronic verification. So many times you'll get in trouble because of that. But if somebody who's on continuing therapy, you can still use electronic verification to make sure that they have the same insurance, deductibles, and so on and so forth. So that part, as well as a rule-based mechanism or rule-based decisions, especially for low dollar either drugs or procedures, can easily be approved. And what happens even right now in these scenarios, about 45 to 50% are approved on the first pass. Of those, the other 45 to 55% that are declined, the payers will request additional info, and from then on, it is all manual process, right? Because the additional info goes to the payer, they have to review it, they decide it. From there, another the 10 to 25% are declined. You appeal, 95% are approved, 5% decline, and then finally it goes to reconsideration. So now the question is, why do we need electronic prior auth, and why do we need it now? And I think this number way undershoots for especially for us in the infusion world. So what the study was done, and the study said that the healthcare industry will save $450 million per year if we could transition to electronic prior auths. And the main reason is because, as we all are seeing, and I talked about why the rate of prior authorization keeps going up, obviously because of changes in demographics and because of age, the chronic diseases are increasing, and then the drug prices are increasing, and that ultimately is resulting into higher prior authorizations. So when we talk about the automated prior auth space. And as you talk to different companies right now over the next few years, this is an alphabet soup you will hear. AI, as you all know, stands for artificial intelligence, machine learning, natural language processing, optical character recognition, which is being used for 20 years now, robotic process automation. A lot of companies, since full automation is not possible, they're using these computer bots to automate some of the processes, but you still have a lot of manual processes involved. And then API, which is an interface application programming interface, which allows two different programs to talk. So there's an interesting thing about API. Both Blue Cross Blue Shield and United Healthcare, they said that they have an API for prior authorization where you can use that API to submit your prior auth request. And that has been there for at least a year, possibly 2 years. But when you go and talk to them that, hey, I want to utilize their API, there is absolutely no support for it, no response, no way to submit your prior auth request by API, at least to these two largest payers. So, what is the current state of automation? 278 transactions are being used by some payers, as I said, for some very low cost procedures. Pretty much nobody is using for drugs. And what happens with 278 transactions? It's almost like sending a claim. The entire process is automated, and literally what you and I are looking for. You can send your prior auth request electronically to the payer, and you can receive the response back from the payer. That's all we are asking. We are able to send our request that, hey, do you approve this procedure? And the insurance company sends us an electronic signal back. Yes, it is approved, or no, it is denied. And then you take the process on. But right now, even though 278 transactions have been mandated for a long time, they're only being used by very few payers and for very, very few procedures. API, we just talked about, these major players have APIs, but none of them are functioning. Some companies are using bots. They use bots to fill out prior auth forms, send it to the payer companies, and use bots to check the status of prior auths, and then update back either the practice management system, or their own system. Some of the companies are trying to go the other way and look at payer guidelines and see how they can codify it. So, for example, you have a patient with certain diagnosis with a certain drug. Blue Cross Blue Shield, what does their guidelines say? What all do you need to submit for prior authorization and things like that? So some of the work is being done. The challenge there is there are approximately 1.5 million payer policies. It's and guess, I mean, once you have done a lot of work in codifying it, guess what happens next? They change it. Exactly, exactly. So just keeping up with it and continuously be on top of it, it's just a very, very tough mountain to climb. And then EHR integrated solutions, not and almost nothing is there as far as the drug side is concerned. Some EHRs have done good work on the radiology side, but the drug side, just because there's so much documentation is involved, there is pretty much no solution which is fully integrated, where you can send a prior auth request from within EHR, get a response back within the same EHR, whether it was approved or denied. Now, how can we use artificial intelligence to automate some of the processes? We already know that entire process, because of the manual reviews we will not be able to automate. So whenever there are low complexities and mid and high, and when I say low complexities, I mean the requests that are following the rules that are set by the insurance companies. As long as you are using those, the insurance companies should be able to automate some of these processes. And some of the payers are trying to do that. Some of the companies are trying to help payers do that. But how much motivation is there from the payer side to make it easier? That's always a question. So now, if you go back to the same workflow and if you look at which steps of that workflow can truly be automated using either AI or a combination of AI and natural language processing. And natural language processing is nothing but for a computer to be able to read the payer policy, to read the notes, and approve or deny a claim. And that technology is there, has been there for a little while, and it's getting better as we speak. Artificial intelligence and machine learning is where computer is constantly learning from the data they have absorbed for years and years. So payers have all that data for many, many years. They know this drug, this diagnosis, how many times they have approved it, how many times they have denied it. And they can easily put these algorithms in place where, if nothing, even if they can address the things that we talked about, these 55 to 60% of the cases, and then you only have to deal with the other 40 to 50%, that alone can make at least our lives much easier when it comes to getting prior auths. So, what are the challenges? Access to EHR data. I don't know how many of you here work with hospital systems, but if you have ever gone to Epic and talked to them about getting a hook into their data, it's not easy. And they want your firstborn for it. It's just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, we have been talking about interoperability for a very, very long time. And there are always all these hurdles created by different stakeholders, whoever it is, payers, EHRs, other players in this field, trying to not give access to that data, which can make it easier for you and me to get these prior authorizations. Another challenge is coding consistency. And a good example that comes to mind is price transparency, and that's another one of our projects where we are getting the price transparency data from about 3,000 hospitals. And what we are finding, especially for drugs, one hospital would submit the data with the entire drug payment, the other hospital will only show you per unit payment. So it makes it so tough. I mean, not just for us, I'm sure it makes it tough for the payers also. And recently, I'm sure you saw this data point. Payers were forced to reveal their rates and their payments, and all they did is dump hundreds of terabytes of data and go figure out how to make sense of it. It's just a paralysis by analysis kind of situation. That how if you don't have consistency in data, if you have too much data, how do you solve it? And then is there motivation on the side of payer? And to them, whenever I get to talk to payers, I always say this is I completely understand your criteria for reviewing what we are doing on the clinical side. All I ask is allow us to get this data in an efficient manner to you and send your results back to us in an efficient manner. That's all we are asking. We are not saying you change what you're doing because, I mean, you do what you do for whatever reason, but the challenge that we have is in this entire logistics of sending prior auths, getting the results back, continuously follow up, being on the phone, still utilizing fax lines and so on and so forth. And then some of the payers have come up with these third-party companies, New Century Health, AIM Specialty Health, Evercore, Health Help, and all these companies coming up with pathways that, hey, if you're on our pathway, we will make it easier for you to get prior auth, or you don't have to get prior auth at all. We will issue it on our portal itself. But then the adaptation across different practices, how widespread it is, physicians still want to do what they want to do, and especially on the hospital side, there is a little bit less adaptation on the private practice side, and there is a little bit more of this. So finally, my crystal ball, as I have dealt with dealt with prior auths for all these years where I see prior auths going. So the biggest thing that I see is there are a lot of current technologies that can be used right now. And all those things we talked about, some of them have been around for many, many years. The interoperability, either by hook or crook, I really feel, I mean, or by new technologies, or something has to give. We have been talking about HL7, we have been talking about Fire now, Da Vinci, APIs, I mean, all of these things, and we still do not have true interoperability where we can get the electronic clinical data we need and be able to utilize it. And that, I mean, ultimately, it is helping our practices and hospitals and everyone to get this thing rolling. But again, till the EHRs play the ball, and I have a feeling that regulatory pressures are going to do that for payers, and it is going to do that for EHRs. Now, it's a type, it's not gold star, it's gold card. So in Texas, and a lot of states are looking at the Texas gold card law. The law was passed in 2020, but it hasn't gone into effect yet. And on the face of it, it sounds great. So, in a very simplified manner, the law says that if 90% of your orders get approved or get prior auth, then the payer cannot impose onerous requirements on you for getting prior auth. So any provider in the state of Texas, if 90% and 90% is 20 minimum of 20 prior auth requests over a period of 6 months. So 90% of your prior auths get approved and the payers cannot impose onerous requirements. Now, obviously, they're still forming the rules. Even the law has been passed, there's a lot of lobbying going on in the rulemaking process, but a lot of states are looking at the gold card law. And a lot of people at the federal level as well, that how it gets implemented, especially how can that adopted on the Medicare Advantage plans and Medicare talking about prior authorization as well. So there are a lot of regulatory pressures because everyone is looking at this thing that how it has become a monster on its own. And innovation. I mean, it's can never get past the human ingenuity, right? So a lot of companies coming up with innovative ideas both on the provider side as well as payer side. And finally, value-based care, which was thought to be the panacea, that hey, you follow our guidelines, you will never have to get prior auth and so on and so forth, but it always boils down to value for whom. Is it value for payers? Is it value for the practice? Is it value for patients? And unfortunately, they sometimes are not on the same page. All of us like to say that patient is always first, it's all about patients. But there are so many competing priorities that sometimes, unfortunately, patients get left behind. And the entire system is suffering because of that. And then the drug costs keep going up. Prior auths are not going away, guys. I mean, hey, there was a great article in Wall Street Journal when this breast cancer drug came out called Ibrance, and they interviewed a lot of people from Pfizer and asked, how did you come up with this $10,000 a month cost for this drug, 28 or 30 pills? And the basic gist of the article was they picked the number out of thin air. It wasn't that there was some big research and development cost and all of these things. So it's that these costs will keep going up, and this act that was just passed, allowing Medicare to negotiate prices, even though it's only 10 drugs and then 10 drugs for the year two and 10 drugs for year three. Eventually, the drug companies will figure out that okay, these if it's not these 10 drugs, maybe some other drugs are seeing the increases. So the final thing I'll leave you with is let's use intelligent automation till we get to true artificial intelligence where we get that magic button when we press it and we get the results we are looking for, especially when it comes to prior auth. Thank you so much for giving your attention, and I'm so sorry that I rambled on. I would love to answer any questions if you have any questions. So regulatory pressure, how can we participate in that? Great. Great question. Oh my gosh. I mean, talk to your congressman, your senator, especially in the state. I think on a state level, we'll be able to make much bigger difference. And what state you're in? Oh, awesome, awesome. So let's see. So yeah, biggest thing I'm in Dallas, so we are neighbors. So the biggest thing I would say for that is let's make sure that we are keeping the pressure on, and the Texas. I forgot what it's called. The medical society there is working with the lawmakers. Every single pair, every single lobbying organization is lobbying to get their input into that, and we should be there. Well, manufacturer to 100% it does, but there are always competing priorities. It is, and sometimes from the payers' point of view, they're looking for it. How does it help their bottom line? And I think this law is a step in the right direction, but by the time the rulemaking comes, does it get diluted? We don't know. I think a lot has to be seen. But I think this can be a trailblazing thing for a lot of other states, and everyone is looking towards it to see how it performs. Any other questions? Well, thank you once again, guys. Really appreciate it. Alright, let's see if I can remember how to do this. Out, stop.